live stream number 27. That's not a reference to the YouTube channel, by the way. I do apologise that we've been a little bit late this evening. My supper took a little bit longer to cook than I thought, which is sort of annoying. Also, I only remembered that we were doing this about an hour ago, and so I'm not wearing the sort of clothes that I would normally do, which I hope is not too much of a problem for you. I don't have sort of problems with knees and things though, like some other channels do, because I don't show those. But tonight we are talking about the royal family, actually. There are two different sort of ways about that. We're talking about the cars used in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Obviously, that is a film about, well, someone who works for Her Majesty the Queen. In this case, George Lazenby, James Bond. We're also talking about the cars that the Queen owned herself, or the royal family at large. But there's a certain type of car owned by the Princess Royal that we can't talk about. And there's actually a Facebook group dedicated to the fact that she owned one of a certain car, and it's just not done in the circles I inhabit to talk about that particular type of car. So we won't be talking about that. Anybody who does will be admonished. I'm afraid it's just the way that it goes. So I'm just having the live stream up on the screen here on the other account that I have, which makes it a lot easier for me to actually look at things whilst it's happening, and then we can start. Right. British Leyland Quality Control. Was there any British Leyland Quality Control? Terrible joke. Says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. David Perkins says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you as well, sir. Mr. Andy G, good evening to you, sir. Jonathan Bramble says, greetings from Turkey. Greetings to you as well, sir. Chambers 101 says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you, sir. Sir Depeche Mode, our resident channel celebrity, says, good evening. Good evening to you as well, sir. Sean Cook says, good evening, boss man. The film about an Aston Martin DBS. Yes, On Her Majesty's Secret Service does feature an Aston Martin DBS. It's a very early one. Although it's not perhaps the most prominent thing in the film, I wouldn't say. The royal family really liked Granada Gear X estates. Yes, they did. They had several special ones of those. Some of you have been discussing that with me since we went to the Nebworth Classic Car Show. Mr. Wattis of Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, good evening, sir, from a rainy Edinburgh. It's not rainy here down in Hampshire. I'm sorry to hear that weather in Scotland isn't particularly to your liking tonight. Russell Hunter says, good evening. What is your poison this evening? We have this can of Aldi Perry, or pear cider as some people call it. I don't mind. I'm not particular in that way. But I will open it up and we will have a little sip of this. Right, that's good. Okay. So, Simone Hooked on Classics says, hello to everybody. Hello, Simone. Yes, it's been a busy day for uploads. We've already done 2 uploads today, and we've already we've got another one now because I said we'd do this, and we are. British Leyland Quality Control says, I remember the former Prince of Wales, that is King Charles III now, driving a Vauxhall Omega 3-litre estate. Oh, elite trim when Prince William was in school. What a perfect car to pick up your son from public school. Perfect, yeah. Brilliant, yeah. That's the kind of thing that in the sort of late 90s would have been an ideal car to turn up at that sort of establishment in, I would have thought. Simone from Hood and Classic says, good evening from a disappointed person who attended a terribly disappointing classic car show today. I'm sorry to hear that, Simone. What was so disappointing about your classic car show today? I was disappointed actually myself at Concord Classics in Eastleigh because they kept interrupting my filming with announcements. It's not a great video, part one, there are two parts, because they kept interrupting me with announcements. It was just an absolute nightmare. I had to keep stopping like several times because I just kept doing these announcements. Eventually, I ran out of time. I just had to talk over them, which I hate talking over announcements, but there wasn't really a choice. Otherwise, I would have just sat stuck like a lemon. Yeah, that wasn't my favourite really. Right, back on the topic. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says Her Majesty arrived in Edinburgh safely today in a Mercedes hearse. A Mercedes hearse. Interesting. That is maybe not what I would have expected. I would have expected like a Jaguar or something like that. But I know Prince Philip had a special Land Rover sort of hearse that had been designed for him. I think when he had his funeral, from memory. I can't remember now. I think that was what happened. Sean Cook says, Ghost Ship Pale Ale from Adnams to Southwold tonight. Schlanche. I think that's the way you say it, isn't it? Schlanche. Oh, Simone, they had music at the show so loud it was unbearable. Yes, welcome to Nebworth Classic Car Show. Every single one of those 11 parts, I think, had either announcements or really loud music. It was, oh my gosh. I got through that somehow. I'm glad I did because it was a very popular series of videos. Lot 76 cars. Simon, hello Simon. I read in Practical Classics there was a one-off Vauxhall Viceroy estate built for the Queen. Yes, you're absolutely right. The only Viceroy estate was built for the Queen. The Viceroy was sort of in between in the Vauxhall range in this country. It was between the Carlton and the Royale. There was a Royale saloon and coupe, and the Viceroy was in the middle. It was a body of a Carlton with a six-cylinder engine from the Royale. Now, before that facelift, so we're looking at the A1 models, there was the Record, there was the Commodore, and there was the Senator. Those are the Opel equivalents. And then after the facelift, they started to get rid of kind of the Opel badge models, and they, I think, only came up with three afterwards. There was a Carlton, they dropped the Viceroy, the Monza continued as an Opel, which was the Royale Coupe, and then there was the Senator of that, which was an Opel at first, but from 85 was a Vauxhall as it went on. Fossil Hunter says, Diana's Escort Cabriolet. It wasn't an Escort Cabriolet, sir. It was a Series 1 RS Turbo in black. The only one in black. The only other one that was any other colour than white was actually driven by Tracy Louise Ward in the second series of Cat's Eyes. It was blue. But yes, RS Turbo. I don't know if she had an Escort Cabrio, but certainly she had a gear, and then she had an RS Turbo. That was the RS Turbo. Right, here we go. British Aid and Quality Control says the Duke of Edinburgh's custom Land Rover was a forbidden fuel. Therefore, we cannot talk about the Duke of Edinburgh's hearse because we don't talk about diesels on this channel. Sean Cook says excellent pronunciation of Sláinte. I've never been to Ireland. I have the Republic of Ireland Northern Ireland, I'm afraid. Stuart Saunders says, I think the royal family mostly drive Audis these days. I know William does and the new king does, King Charles. I don't know. This is what we're discussing. Chambers 101. The royals love their Land Rovers. Oh my gosh. Yes, sir, they do. I think Queen Elizabeth actually had a really early Series 1. I wouldn't be the expert on that, but I'm pretty sure she did. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, I was expecting a Jaguar Daimler, but it's our local funeral director in Edinburgh who was tasked with drive from Balmoral to Edinburgh. That's interesting. Just a local funeral director in Edinburgh got out of Mercedes. Okay, fair enough. I know Princess Diana, she had a Daimler DS420, I think, when she was taken up to, I forget the name of the place. It was in Leicestershire somewhere, isn't it, where she's buried? John Cotton Classics. Evening, Mr. Lloyd, and all. Sorry, a bit late. Don't worry, sir. I was a bit late myself because my meal preparation overran. Mr. Watson, Scottish Car Enthusiast Traders TV says, I believe the Duke of Edinburgh had an electric Bedford van. I'm not sure it was actually his, but I have seen that. That was actually in the British Motor Museum. It's a 1980 Bedford CF, but it's electric. And that's absolutely right. It's before the facelift occurred, making it into a CF2. Just before that. And I think Mr. Coleman's father worked on that or something. I can't remember. Something like that. For some reason, that Bedford CF, although it's electric, still has an exhaust pipe. If somebody knows the answer to that question, why the electric Bedford CF van that was in some way connected with the royal family, that's in the British Motor Museum, has an exhaust pipe, please let us know. Right, so there's people talking about the choice of hearse. I'm afraid, Simon, with Lot 76 Cars, we cannot talk about what you're mentioning to do with Princess Anne. We're not allowed to talk about that, I'm afraid. Russell Hunter, I'll be the first to mention Princess Anne and the car we can't mention. I'm afraid that's banned, sir. We're not allowed to talk about that. Sean Cook says to Mr. Waters, good evening, Davey. Had a dull but balmy 3 days in Edinburgh last weekend relocating my daughter. That's very nice, sir. You were obviously a dedicated father. British Aid Quality Control. The Queen had a rather lovely Rover P5B coupe on an episode of Top Gear. Yes, it was filmed, I think, in 2003. I think it was the first series of James May of the relaunched Top Gear. So, yes, I've seen that. And, of course, the car that I drove quite recently for the 6,000 subscriber special was very similar to that car. The Queen had several P5s. I think the one that's in the museum is JGY 280. There's also a JGY 280K. JGY 280, by the way, the plate was moved around several P5s. It wasn't just one of them. She had maybe 5 P5s in total. She absolutely loved the things. Really loved them. I thought it was great, but the steering is alarmingly light in a P5. That's one thing I would say about those. John Colton says, apologies for being late. That's no problem, sir. British Chronicle, John Nat, Russell, Hunter, Althorpe. Yes, that's why Princess Diana is based. Althorpe, thank you. Bad Book says, good evening, sir. Simon Not 26 Cars says, did you ever hear the story about Prince Andrew knocking down a gate at Windsor with a Range Rover as he allegedly didn't want to drive a long way around? I don't know, sir. I'm afraid I haven't got a clue. Simone from Hooked on Classics said, I heard she had a Reliant Robin. Is that a Princess Royal? No, I'm afraid not. James 101 says, the Queen used to drive the Austin K2 ambulances. Yes, absolutely. There's one of those in the the second episode of a very, very obscure series called H.G. Wells' Invisible Man. It was made in 1958 to 1959. It's made around Elstree and Borehamwood, and made by ITC, if anybody of you knows The Invisible Man. Second episode of that's got Lost in K2 in it. Mr. Waters, Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trains TV says, Princess Diana had a mini metro, and then Russell Hunter says, didn't Diana have a metro? Yes, she did. That was her first car before the escorts, 2 escorts she had. She did have a mini metro. I think it was a very early one. It was a 1980 in red, from what I remember. It's quite a low spec one. Jay Spears. I think we're talking about the electric Bedford CF van. The exhaust on the Bedford CF was made for battery heat. Yeah, it could be, I suppose. Good evening. Hope you're having a good day. Yes, it's a busy day. Third upload for the day. Um, Pretty crazy. John Wilkes says, my knowledge is endless. My knowledge is not endless, sir. You will find in various points of Concord Classics, I get things wrong. I mix my words up. And particularly with like the supercars, it just all goes to pot. I don't know anything about them. So there we go. Sean Cook says the Rolls-Royce Phantom 6 was a great car, apparently capable of many hours at 100 miles an hour without a problem whatsoever. Yeah. There's an episode of The Avengers called, what's it called? The Fear Merchants, where they actually have one of those driven. No, so it's a cloud, but they use a Phantom 6 for the interior shots or Phantom 5. So you can go quite fast in a Rolls Royce if you want to, but it's not very gentlemanly to race around in a Rolls Royce, really. Martha Badbook says, I saw on YouTube the Queen was in a Daimler based on the XJ6. Corgis getting on a plane at the airport. 8 corgis and the Queen on the back seat. Dogs got off for leading on the plane. Very well behaved dogs. This is interesting. Simon from Lot 76 Cars says, did a princess ever drive a princess? I certainly know that with the limousine princesses, but with the first ones, they would have carried a royal family in them, so yes. Whether a princess ever drove a princess, or the sort of, the British Island princess, I have no idea, I'm afraid. Simone from Classics confirms that, yes, Dinah had a Metro. I didn't know that was in a museum, that's interesting. So that means the Escort gear that she had and the RS Turbo she had, they obviously have been preserved. Sean Cook is just replying to Mr. Waters about something to do with Edinburgh. I've never heard of Easter Road myself. I'm not very familiar with Edinburgh, but hopefully we're going there at some point later this year. British Road quality control. This is a very, very good point. The Duke of Edinburgh was very fond of the Freelander. Yes, I think the last car he ever drove was a Freelander. It was a very, very late Freelander too. And when that accident happened, which I hate to say this, it probably was his fault. I think most of you probably know that. He had it replaced with another car that was almost identical. They didn't just go and buy a Discovery Sport. They went and bought almost an identical Freelander 2. Obviously, I don't think they let him drive it anymore. The backlash to what happened to the accident sort of meant that they didn't let him get it behind the wheel anymore. So that was it. So yeah, he was quite fond of those. He drove them until I think the accident happened. I think he was driving those until then. Bad Book says they are rebuilding the car museum at Sandringham. Well, yeah, it's about right time, isn't it? Mr. Waters says he's about 10 minutes from Easter Road in Edinburgh. Excellent. Chaz Brown says, I remember seeing Dinah's Metro at the Coventry Museum of Transport some time ago. Excellent. That's interesting. I didn't see it when I went there. Maybe it's in the private collection or something. I don't know. Kuto says, good evening. Good evening, sir. Russell Cooper, this is a very, very good question. Why did the Metro not have a 5-speed gearbox till the early 1980s? It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same question as why didn't the classic Mini ever have a 5-speed gearbox as standard? It's because they had a transmission and sump layout, and you couldn't just bolt like another gearbox onto it if you wanted it. The gearbox was part of the engine block effectively because it's in the sump. It was all together in one unit. Now that means the packaging is really, really good. It's one of the reasons why Minis and Metros have very good packaging. But in terms of like designing a new 5-speed gearbox for that, I think there probably was no money for it or something. So when the K Series Metro came out, the Rover Metro in 1990, they actually used in most models a Peugeot Citroën design gearbox called the R65 gearbox that is in the same end-on configuration as most front-wheel cars. For example, the Nissan 100NX I drove today has an end-on 5-speed gearbox. So it was obviously easy just to adapt to existing gearbox, in this case this Peugeot one, to go on that. Whereas the Minis and Metros and obviously earlier cars that also use transmission and sump, like the Allegro, that used transmission and sump. There was obviously it was just a little bit. It just was a little bit difficult to adapt that to a 5-speed gearbox. You would have to have made a unique gearbox for it. Stuart Saunders says, before the Metro, Diana had a blue Renault 5. Did Diana have a blue Renault 5? I didn't know that. So we're actually getting somewhere today with that. Simone from John Classic says, I remember he crashed Discovery. It wasn't. It was a Freelander 2. Although maybe he crashed Discovery at some other point, but the accident he had, it was a Freelander 2. Sean Cook says, to Mr. Waters, no doubt when we do in the near future with a less crazy schedule. Yes, crazy schedule. 3 uploads in a day. Russell Hunter says, I crashed a school disco once and got thrown out. Why did you crash for disco? Oh, sir. Or is that just a joke? I understand the joke, but it's good nevertheless. Bad books. I saw at Sandringham a car transporter unloading 2 older green Freelanders. Yep. Range Rovers and New Discoveries a few years before the Duke Edinburgh accident. Yeah, they absolutely loved those Land Rovers. Absolutely loved those. British Air Quality Control says King Charles III has an Aston Martin DB5 convertible. Yes, he does. And there's Jay Spears has just actually confirmed he absolutely does have one of those. Sean Cook says the Metro and Mini were fine with the gearbox and sump 4-speed. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to run a 5th gear at some point, but you have to get an aftermarket conversion for that. It's not something you can just get away with. One of the reasons why the MG Metro Turbo was capped at 93 horsepower was because we didn't think the gearbox was strong enough to take any more. I think it is the same transmission with all the A-Series Metros, unless you're going for an auto. Of course, that's different. Simone, don't worry, Simone. It's not a problem. There's no reason why you know exquisite details about things like that. I just have a stupid brain that remembers things I don't need to, and doesn't remember a lot of things I do need to. I'm sure a lot of you feel like that. So Mark from Bad Book says, I think King Charles Aston Martin runs on wine. Does it, sir? I can't remember what it runs on. Is it LPG or something? I'm not actually sure. Right, if we don't have any more sort of things to say there, we'll get on to talking about the cars on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Oh, no, Russell Hunter says Diana had an Audi Cabrio in the 90s. Yes, she did. Famously, she really, really did have an Audi 80 Cabrio, or later just an Audi Cabrio. She might have even had several of those. Somebody might know more about that. But yeah, she's only had at least one of them, because I remember her having one. Simone says, the longest I ever got to the Buckingham Palace was in 1996, just down the road from Big Ben. Yes, they're not that far apart, actually. You can walk that distance in not long at all. Chris Weddle says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Sean Cook, we should have a lot of respect for the lady in the accident with Duke of Edinburgh. Yes, absolutely. That probably wasn't her fault. I think she was just driving along the road and the car came out in front of her. And there was a sun dazzle as well, which maybe it's probably not 100% his fault either. It wasn't great either what happened. And it's amazing that he survived that, to be honest. Yeah, who would you call an accident? British Quality Control says the Duke of Edinburgh also crashed a Range Rover into a Mercedes 190E in the 1990s. Oh right, okay. So Simone, you're not wrong, because it there you go. Chaz Brown says Diana's Metro was in the Coventry Transport Museum in about 2014. Yeah, quite possibly. Russell Hunter says, confession, I have yet to see it on a Majesty's Secret Service. I'm not going to go over the plot of that, because we'd be here all night. And, I have told my lady wife we are finishing the live stream at a certain time. I don't go on as long on live streams as some other channels do. Simon Not 76 Cars says, the poor 190E, yes, which got destroyed after that accident. Sean Cook has started us off on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Was there a Mercury Cougar XR7 in Her Majesty's Secret Service? Yes, sir, there was. In fact, I shall bring up the list of cars in here so we know what we're talking about. Unlike most of the time on this channel when we get everything wrong. To make sure I get all the specs right, because it's been a while since I've actually done the video. I did the video on the cars of that film about 2 years ago now. It is probably my favourite film in the series, but whether it's the best one, I don't know. Everyone's got their favourites. You could argue like all night which one's the best one. I don't know if I can really say that. I just think it's my favourite one. That's a different thing that we got to see here. Okay, yes. Answer to the question. Mercury Cougar XR7, yes, absolutely. And that one was, I think it's a 69. Yes, it's a 69. I was right about that. So that's the car driven by Diana Rigg, who plays a part, which is the Contessa Teresa Di Vicenza, or just Tracy. The villains on Her Majesty's Secret Service use a 1963 Mercedes 220S, which gets kind of written off and catches on fire during an ice racing scene, which is very good. The ice racing scene is absolutely amazing. And in answer to what Cyberlot 76 Cars is saying, yes, absolutely. George Lazenby drove an Aston Martin DBS in that. I don't know if that car's still around, actually. It's GKX8G. It was supplied by Aston Martin themselves. It's actually a Vantage model. Yeah, it was the same kind of registration sequence as a car used in an episode of The Avengers, which is called Split, where a very early DBS, also a KX registered car, was driven by Nigel Davenport. It was like a sort of plum colour. I can't remember where Aston Martin. I think they were based in Feltham or something at the time, or Newport Pagnell. It's sort of between the two. I always forget when they changed from Feltham to Newport Pagnell. I don't know if that car's still around. I don't know. There's a lot of debate about whether that's a proper Vantage or not, but a lot of people just say that it is, so I believe them. So we can go now to the other car that's used prominently in the film. So we've covered some of them already, and that's the Rolls-Royce. And it's actually driven by, most of the time, by Gabriele Fazzetti, I think his name is. It's this sort of henchman. It's a 68 Silver Shadow drop head coupe, so it's brand new, but it's by Mulliner Park Ward. It's not a Corniche. The Corniche didn't exist at that time, so it's not one of those. Those are sort of the main cars used in the series. I mean, there are others as well, but those are the main ones used in the film. The DBS isn't used an awful lot, actually. It's not used an awful lot. The Mercury Cougar is the one that has the chase in Switzerland on the mountain roads and also the ice rink. Also, I should say, no, sorry, it's an ice track, not an ice rink. There's an ice rink later in the film, but it's just an ice track. Simone from Hoots on Classics says, "Do you know what Rolls-Royce the King travelled in from the airport?" No, I'm afraid I don't actually. It looks like a Phantom 6, but I might be wrong. So Simon from Lots of 26 Cars says George Lazenby drove an Aston Martin DBS. Yes. He filmed the DBS from the Persuaders recently. Yes, that's a DBS. It's PPP 68 is the real plate, or BS1 it was in the series. I think it's a 70. That's in, I think it's called Bahama Yellow. The wheels on them from a V8, but it's a standard 6-cylinder car. The boot lid is signed by Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, absolutely. It's sold for £533,000. I think it's a bit too much for me, really. One of those. Imagine if you sold one of the original cars using Goldfinger, it'd be even more. Mr. Waters from Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trades TV makes a very good point. It should be the same Rolls-Royce Prince Anne came down to Edinburgh today, and I've got a fleet of them. But they do have a fleet of them. They do, I'm afraid so. There we go. We've got tons of cars in the Royal Family. Absolutely tons of cars. British Technology Control says, I never liked the modern burgundy custom Bentley the Queen used. I've seen that. That was actually at an event called, what do they call it? It's at Hampton Court. I forget the name of actually what the show's called. It's a very exclusive to the concourse event. I think they just call it Hampton Court Concourse, maybe. But yeah, when I went to that in 2019, they actually did have the Bentley there, and it is a custom car. It's in purple. They made it in 2002, I think, probably for the Golden Jubilee. I don't know if I like that or not, to be honest, really. They call it a Bentley State Limousine, I think, is the name of it. Sean Cook. Now, we're talking about the cars on demand Secret Service. Were there Mark 1 Ford Escort RS Mexicos? No, there were not. There were plenty of Minis and Mark 1 Escorts, but I don't think the Mexico actually existed by 69. The film was made late 68, early 69, and I don't think the Mexico was out by then. So the Escorts in those, in that, there were several of them. They are just, I don't know, normal Escort. So Escort twin cams, they're just normal. The information I have here, it's just like an Escort Deluxe. They were, yeah, just early normal Escorts, I think, as far as I know. Simon from Not 76 Cars says, for someone who's into Persuaders like I am, this is very interesting. I spoke by chance to the last owner of the DBS, who became too paranoid to drive it and had a replica signed out lid made in case he got rear-ended. Yeah, I understand. That would be a good thing to do. Sean Cook says very knowledgeable. Well, I get things wrong all the time, so it's just I'm checking my information against what I know here as well. So I'm double checking just to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Apparently, the owner of the DBS and the Persuaders only sold the car you needed to buy a house. Well, if you live down in the area where Persuaders was mainly made, and we're not talking about like south of France and things like that. We're talking about in and around Pinewood Studios and sort of London, that corner of it, which is out near, what's the nearest sort of big place to it? Sort of Gerrard's Cross area, Uxbridge on one side. It's a very, very wealthy area. You would need a lot of money to buy a house around there. I went there recently to look at some locations from Persuaders and some other series, New Avengers and Man in a Suitcase and things. And yeah, everybody there's got enormous houses with electric gates and incredibly expensive large SUVs and things over there. Yeah. Right. Do we have anything else we need to discuss? We've actually discussed cars of the Royal Family quite a lot this evening. If there's nothing else, then we might call it a day, actually. Is there anything else that you'd like to ask? If not, then we'll finish there. And we'll have another one of these. Let's just see if we can have one in a couple of weeks. Just think about this. Yes, we can. Yeah. So, thank you ever so much indeed for watching this slightly less professional live stream. It's certainly been slightly less professional today, number 27. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Like this video and leave a comment below. We'll just read this final one from Mr. Waters, Scottish Car Enthusiast and Trades TV. I know Gerrard's Cross quite well. My lady wife has family near Gerrard's Cross. Yes. So it was we don't talk about falling cameras on this channel. We might do on Saturday, sir. That's all I'm saying. Russell Hunter says could do discussion on period television. We've done loads of videos actually on period television. It's like my channel used to be known for just talking about cars using television series from like 1959 to 2000. There's tons of videos about cars actually on film and television on the playlist if you want to see it. I've done loads of videos on that, but we might do another live stream. That might be the theme for another one. I'll have to pick something to do with that. I hope you enjoy it. And to on classics, Simone says TC will be getting surgery soon. Oh, I look forward to that. I'm looking forward to driving TC at some point. Simone, I've not forgotten about that. Rossman says late to the party. Yes, have a look at some of the earlier videos on the channel, starting in like 2019, right way through to sort of beginning of this year, where I've done an absolute ton of videos on cars using television and in film. But thank you ever so much. And yes, Simon's final comment. I'm still hoping for Talbot to go a test drive. So am I, sir. Thank you.